Erev Tov Rabotai, we are continuing with our Mishnah Yomi, Masechet Moed Katan. We are up to Perek Bet, Mishnah Dalid. Today's Mishnah should be Le'elu Nishmat, Neria ben Svetlana, Aranbayev, and Eliyahu ben Burcha Israelov, Menuchatam beGan Eden, Amen, and Le'avdeh ben Chaim L'Chaim, v'derefua shenemav, Daniel Shalom ben Rosa, Betoch Shar Chulei Israel. This Mishnah discusses additional prohibitions on Chol HaMoed that do not involve melacha, beginning with the topic of buying and selling on Chol HaMoed. The Mishnah begins, En lokchin batim avadim uvehema. We may not purchase homes, slaves, or animals on Chol HaMoed, ela letzorach HaMoed, unless they are needed by the buyer for the festival. For example, he needs a place to live during the festival, or a servant to care for his needs, or an animal to slaughter for meat. The prohibition against buying and selling on Chol HaMoed is not limited to these particular items. It is actually forbidden to buy and sell anything on Chol HaMoed because of the exertion generally involved, unless it is needed for the festival. The Mishnah singles out houses, servants, and animals in order to teach that when they are needed for the festival, even these items may be bought, even though the purchase of these particular items will naturally become a public event. Or by the seller who does not have what to eat and needs the money from the sale to provide for his Yom Tov food. Meaning, if the seller needs money to buy food for the festival, one may purchase these articles from him, houses, slaves, animals, even though they are not needed by the buyer for the festival. The Mishnah discusses another activity that is prohibited because of the exertion involved. And mifanim mibayit labayit, we may not move items from one house to another distant house on Chol HaMoed, because this involves much exertion and is visible to the public. However, one may move items from one house to another within the same courtyard, since this does not involve as much exertion and can be done in a more private manner. Now, this distinction applies only to items that a person does not need during the festival. However, if he does need them for the festival, he may move them even if you have to carry them to a distant house, as the Mishnah Berurah tells us in Orach Chaim chapter 535, Halacha 4. Now, under certain circumstances, it is prohibited to carry things even a short distance. And mivin kelim mibet ha'oman, we may not bring home utensils from the house of a craftsman, which refers to items that were given to a craftsman before Yom Tov for repairs, because people might think they were given to him to be repaired on Chol HaMoed. However, items needed on Chol HaMoed may be brought home, as the Rav tells us. Im choshesh lahem, however, if one is concerned about them and fears they may be stolen from the craftsman's house, mifanan lechatzer acheret, he may move them from the craftsman's house to a house in a different courtyard, but not to his own home, meaning to a courtyard near the home of the craftsman. If this too is not possible, one may bring the item home as long as it remains hidden from public view. And that is an abotai of Mishnah Daled. Mishnah continues to rule regarding activities permitted on Chol HaMoed. Mechafin et ktziot bekash, we may cover cut figs spread out in a field with straw on Chol HaMoed to protect them from the rain. In earlier times, figs were commonly dried and pressed into cakes to preserve them for long periods of time. The tops of the figs would be cut off so that the juice could drain, and they were then spread out in a field to dry in the sun, after which they would be pressed together in cakes. To protect the figs from the rain, they would be covered with straw. This is permitted on Chol HaMoed, even though covering the figs with straw involves considerable effort, and the figs are not needed for the festival. Doing so comes under the permit of Davar Aved, a potential loss. Rabbi Yehuda says, Af me'abin, we may even make a thick pile of cut figs in order that the top figs protect those underneath from rain, even though this involves more exertion than covering them with straw. As we learned earlier, it is generally permissible to buy and sell only those items that are needed for the festival. The Mishnah discusses how such buying and selling should be conducted. Merchants who sell fruit, clothing, and utensils may sell these items only in private for the needs of the festival, but not publicly, meaning one may open only one door of his store, keeping the other door locked. As we learned in the previous Mishnah, on Chol HaMoed, it is permitted to sell things that are needed for the festival. However, if merchants who sell throughout the year were to sell their merchandise publicly on Chol HaMoed, people might assume that they are just going about their usual business, selling items that are not needed for the festival. Therefore, our Mishnah states that such merchants may sell these items only in a somewhat private manner. People who are not regular merchants, on the other hand, may sell things needed for Chol HaMoed even publicly. Now, a similar limitation applies to professionals practicing their trades for Chol HaMoed needs. Hatzayadin, v'adashoshot, v'agarosot, osin b'tzina letzorech HaMoed. Trappers, grain pounders, which are people who pound wheat kernels into grits, and bean grinders may do their work in private for the needs of the festival, but not publicly. Although the work should be permitted if it is done for festival needs, since these people generally work with large quantities, it may appear to onlookers they are engaged in their usual weekday activities. We therefore require them to work in private. A private person doing this for his own needs, however, may perform these tasks publicly, for he generally does not deal with large quantities. Therefore, it is clear to everyone that he is performing the work for the needs of the festival. This is why the Mishnah identifies these workers by the name of their occupations: trappers, grain pounders, bean grinders, and does not simply state that trapping, pounding grain, and grinding beans must be done in private. The Mishnah is indicating that the law applies only to professionals. Rabbi Yossi says, the merchants and workers that we spoke about, Rabbi Yossi says, accepted a stringency upon themselves not to work even in private, meaning even though they're permitted to work in private, they extended the prohibition upon themselves to include even what is done in private, and are therefore forbidden to work at their jobs on Chol HaMoed even in private. And the Rav does tell us, Rabbi Yossi, the Halacha does not follow the opinion of Rabbi Yossi. That is in the Botai of today's Mishnah Yomi. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen v'amen.